Welcome to Blue Collar Conversations live from the Blue Boar, and I'm here with Dehenna, Davison and also Paul Howell, and we're taking your views and your comments, what you've been saying all day as you've been watching us live on the Daily Express. So we had a poll running today, and that poll was, would you be willing to spend more to buy British products? Well, would you be willing to spend more to buy British products? At the moment, that poll is running at 96% of you said yes, you would be prepared to pay more, and we'll be talking a little bit more about that. But yesterday we were in Mansfield and we were talking about education and really what does the country need to be doing, and people are saying here now, Red Toon 1892, the government needs to reintroduce training centres. We've got Queen Anne and she's saying we need training courses for youngsters. University, well, that's great, but only for a small percentage of people, and as she sees it, it's 3 years of fun and partying, which is not what it should be about. Actually, I have to question that, Queen Anne, if it is fun and partying at the moment, as they're all quarantined and locked in their rooms. And we've got Rich Guy 007, and he too says, look, we need more people actually having training courses, and he again is questioning how many hours studying people are doing a week at university. 6 hours, he's saying there. And the other thing that came through loud and clear as you've been emailing us is, thank goodness we've got a TV station for us. For too long the BBC now is for woke liberal, it's a woke liberal agenda, says Ken. And somebody else is saying here, this is another Ken Coltus, who's saying we need to be proud of our country, stand up for the silent majority, because the BBC has been way too politicised. So is the BBC way too politicised? Do we think that?
I think there's certainly an argument for that. When you look at coverage over things like Brexit over the years, it certainly seemed like there's been a bit of a tinge to it, which has been far more sort of Remain focused and far more critical of Brexit as a kind of project, as an idea, than I think actually reflects most people out there in society. So I think to some extent, yes, you know, some of the cultural output of the BBC is really good. I love a bit of Downton Abbey. You can take that bit aside from the political coverage, and I think the BBC is really valuable, but we certainly need to keep an eye on the direction the BBC is moving in.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head there with the Brexit coverage. It was so out of kilter with what the whole country was saying. When they looked at what the general election was going to be, it was so out of kilter that what went on. Maybe it's because it is so centralised just in London, in its own little bubble, and that's what people were talking about. You're not speaking to the people in the rest of the country. But I think the key thing today is, would you be willing to spend more to buy British? Paul?
Oh, of course. I think it's it always feels good to support your local environment, whether that's your local town, whether it's your town centre, whether it's your county, whether it's your parliamentary seat in our cases, or whether it's the country. There's always limits. You're not going to pay twice as much for something, but I think paying a small premium to get what is coming from people that's creating jobs in our part of the world is absolutely a good thing to do, and I'd very much stand behind that.
Yeah, well, Chris Colvert from Leeds has emailed in and said government should run a media campaign, buy British for Brexit, encourage the nation to buy British, and also grow your own. Is this something, and I know when I was in Sedgefield with you in the northeast, I really got this feel of coming together. Some people even said on the ground, COVID had brought communities together. We were looking after one another, seeing what we needed down our road, down our street. Shouldn't we be doing the same with the whole country and buying British? So do you get that feeling, Dehenna, when you're out and about, people are really proud?
Oh, completely. There's an amazing sense of community in the northeast that I don't think anywhere else in the country has. I mean, I've got to be biased and say that, but I really do believe it. And I think there's definitely that sort of proudness of being British, proudness of standing up for the values that we have as a country. And one of my favourite visits that I've ever been on was actually in Paul's patch of the eBack washing machine factory, where every single washing machine gets a Union Jack sticker put on there to prove that this is the best of British, it's high quality, and it's really, you know, selling, promoting, being proud of our incredible exports. Yeah, there is that. The North East is incredible. The UK is incredible. And I think it's time we as politicians started talking about that an awful lot more.
And that's another thing that came up, and emails are coming through. It's saying, you know, we don't stand up and shout about how good we are. We're sort of very quiet, maybe restrained, and really we should be, I think, blowing our own trumpet with some of the phrases that have come through. Paul, do you think that?
Well, very much so. And I think you go back to what you said a few minutes ago about, you know, the London-centric bubble on the BBC and things like that. It's the same in terms of the way our economy is being driven. You know, it's being driven by the London-centric services market and not thinking enough about manufacturing, about the fact that we can make things, we do make things. And, you know, again, on the COVID discussion, you know, just look at all the things that we couldn't get at the start of this pandemic. Face masks, because they were all coming from China. You know, I understand that now it's a very high percentage of the orders that are placed, I think it's north of 70%, might even be higher than that, is actually orders placed in the UK now, as opposed to in China and wherever, where it was something like 2% at the start of the pandemic. And I think that's just a microcosm of the way that this has changed people's perception, that actually a shorter supply chain is not only good for local manufacturing, it's good for integrity of supply, it's good for all sorts of different reasons, and we just need to build on that.
So it was a wake-up call to what we can and can't get our hands on should there be a pandemic, should there be a shortage. And of course countries will use it for their home supply, as it were, or wherever they've got stronger supply connections with, but we ourselves weren't making some vital equipment or vital components. And maybe that will drive this renaissance of made in Britain.
I think one of the things that I saw that was absolutely incredible was in those early weeks of the pandemic, when we knew that we'd need things like ventilators and respirators. We saw businesses stepping up to diversify, to change their production lines, to really try and feed into that national effort. And people referred to it as a bit of a wartime effort, and that is how it felt. It shows that our businesses are these amazing powerhouses that can adapt, can manufacture, and can make some of those amazing products that, you know, work for us in the UK, but we can also export out there in the world. And we needn't be afraid of that. And I think, you know, once again, we get onto the Brexit debate, but I think we need to see this as a massive opportunity for Britain to take its place in the world, to go out there with open arms and say, we're here, we mean business, and we want to trade with you.
And I think seeing something as business, as government, as, you know, the public sector, as the private sector, I think that initiative, particularly with at the start of COVID, where we saw Formula One and car companies coming together to do the respirators, then I think we need to make sure we do more of that, make sure there is those stronger connections between business and government, and that's really what they were saying in Sedgefield, wasn't it?
Oh, very much so. You know, they wanted the full engagement, and you know, Sedgefield, it's a fabulous place. You know, we've got some companies in the places like Netpark in Sedgefield itself that are just at the leading edge of technology. You know, these companies are dealing with the Home Office and people like that as a natural trading situation, but they need to get more emphasis behind them. It needs to be more of a natural thing. You know, government procurement has and should in the future just reflect the fact that there's a socio-economic benefit to actually buying in the UK, and not just be cost in terms of you know, the Green Book, or what, in terms of how things are assessed.
And when there was that earthquake, which really did start in the northeast, that political earthquake, we talk about people wanting to take back control. I mean, your seat, Paul, Sedgefield, that was Tony Blair's seat. That is a Labour seat, had 25,000 majority, and then it sort of whittled away. So it didn't happen overnight. People gradually had got, I don't know, how can we say, disgruntled with Labour, really felt they weren't on their side. Did you think you were going to win? And it's an interesting conversation here, because Dehenna, you stood there 2 years before, so between you, what was happening on the ground in the northeast?
Oh, I think as you've said, Esther, it was a progression. You know, the wave started a long time back. The wave started with people just not taking enough care and looking after our part of the world. We had serious numbers of cabinet members that were, in Tony Blair's time, that I don't know what percentage of the cabinet, but a good percentage were actually in our patch. But you saw yourself when we were on the doors, what did they do for us? Was the sort of ground you were getting. And then what we saw, in yesterday's conversations, you talk about Bansfield, and obviously, Ben started a bit of a thing down there. For us, it was a different Ben that started the process in the northeast.
Oh, yeah.
Ben Houchin and the Tees Valley Mayor just started to give people a sign as to what it was like to have a Conservative in charge, and a sign of somebody who's going to be optimistic and looking up and trying to shout positively about our part of the world. And that then became almost a permission that actually, hey, it's not bad that. Yeah, I'll have a piece of that, please. And my Sedgefield constituency has half of the Tees Valley Mayor and half of not. And you do get the discussions. Well, can we not have a bit of what's over the water there? And I think that politically pushed through, and that's why, I think that the national position in terms of the Conservatives and the understanding that we were actually going to be more optimistic and drive things helped very much me to get elected. But the reason I've got so much of a majority now is because of things like Ben and the permissions that have come from around.
And Dehenna had done a bit of the spade work in 2017, but you worked together on that.
Yeah, I did a lot of working with Dehenna at the time, so
So did you know it was good? Did you know you were going to win in 2019? Dehenna, did you see that Paul was going to win in 2019, or was it a shock?
I don't think it was a shock whatsoever, to be honest. I mean, you were there with me in Bishop Auckland, Esther, so you saw the sense of kind of excitement, optimism and hope and support that people were showing for the Conservative Party, the likes of which has sort of never been seen. And Sedgefield, obviously, admittedly, a slightly tougher seat than mine in some ways, but I had absolutely no doubt in my mind that if we had a decent election result, that Paul would be over that line, and what a historic victory it was over in Sedgefield.
Yeah.
But it was the character type of the people, because yes, we were knocking on doors together, and people would come out and say, yeah, Dehenna, let's have a selfie or a photo, let's get this done, let's deliver this. And that, I felt, the spirit of the people there. What do you think was going on? Do you felt they'd been worn down by Labour not delivering for a long time? And I really did feel there was this sort of burst of energy.
I think so. You look back at sort of representation across the North East, and it's been Labour for such a long time, and yet all people have seen is their communities decline, jobs move out of the area. They haven't seen things get better. And at the end of the day, what do we want? We want the best possible lives for ourselves, for our children, for our families. So if people aren't seeing things get better, then it's our job as the Tories to give them a sign that we can do something new. And we were really selling that. And I think the difference between 2017 and 2019, that movement was happening. But what happened in between was Labour just going against the wishes of the people on Brexit, which kind of made people think, okay, maybe these are not the ones who are speaking up for me anymore. And then it was our job to go in there and prove that we were on the side of regular hard-working people. And we did that. And I think what we've really managed to do as a party, particularly through Blue Collar, which is a fantastic organisation, is prove that we are on the side of ordinary working people. We're there for the plumbers, we're there for the electricians, we're there for the hairdressers. In a way to really modernise what the Conservative Party looks like, who it is we're delivering for, whereas 20 years ago we were seen as something very different.
And the levelling up agenda, how important is that on the ground for us to get right?
So important. I know throughout my time knocking on doors, what I was saying to people is, look, you've seen nothing but decline for a really long time. Give us a chance and we'll deliver something. Give us a chance, try something new. If we don't deliver, kick us out in 5 years' time, but give us a go. People are really counting on us to deliver. They're really counting on us to deliver things in our local communities, to deliver, better educational prospects, to crack down on crime, to improve transport, to make lives better. I think levelling up has to be at the very heart and the very core of everything that our government does.
And it's a phrase, levelling up, but what do you think people see that as meaning?
Well, I know from my perspective, what I view levelling up as is ensuring that, through the policies we put into place, it doesn't matter whether you're born in Bishop Auckland, in Richmondshire, in a leafy suburb in the southeast, you can still get on if you're willing to work hard enough. To me, that's what it means, and that means driving up education. It means cracking down on crime in areas that are hit by it and where people see themselves and their families suffering through it. It means making sure that people can get from town to village to get those good jobs. And it means making sure that those jobs are in place so that people have got a chance of a good job and a good life and buying a home in their community without having to flock to a major city somewhere else. To me, that's what levelling up is all about.
And this buying British, this made in the UK, that surely, is that part of it, Paul?
Well, it has to be, and part of the levelling up is about getting more manufacturing opportunities for people, getting actually the jobs back into parts of the world like that. It's just so fundamental as that we do that sort of thing, and it's in terms of levelling up, I think levelling up, it's about levelling up opportunity. Mm-hmm. I think that they've seen, one of the things that I certainly got on the door was, and where are you from? Are you from round here? They wanted assurances that you were close enough to care and that you were embedded in that community, as to where it was. I know, like Dehenna, you were as local as I am, but, when you got selected to Bishop, you then lived there for a year, so by the time the election came, you were well embedded and people knew that you cared about that patch. Mm-hmm. Therefore that was one, I only had 4 questions. It was, it was Brexit, it was Corbyn, it was, what have they done for us, and then where are you from? Mm-hmm. Those were the questions on the doors.
And
people care about yourself.
Do you care is what they're saying. How much do you care? Are you going to be here for the vote and then we're not going to see you again? Is that what they were angling for, having seen that, as you said, whether it was Tony Blair or Mandelson, all these people were supposedly there, but they weren't. They were back in London only thinking about sort of London and their job. Is that what they were asking you? Was that at the heart of that question? Will you be here for us tomorrow, and do you really understand what we're going through?
I think you hit the nail on the head, Esther. That it's very much about, do you understand us? Do you understand what we're about? Do you understand what we need? Are you part of us? Will you be part of us going forward? Will you just, if we elect you, will you then just disappear down there and start talking in their language and not in our language? Will you start talking about the things that matter to the southeast and the business bubble in the south, as opposed to what is our real community stuff? So no, absolutely, they want us to, what we see with the whole blue collar conservatism is that range across the country of people who are from their communities.
I think it's also about appreciating everybody for what they do. It is understanding you need the brickie as much as you need the conveyancing solicitor. It's the fact that you need the person who's doing, as you say, the brickie, the chippy, the plumber, the plasterer, as much as you need somebody to do the bank conveyancing. And I think that's it. Maybe for too long we've overlooked the people who get the country going.
Mm-hmm. And it goes to, to part of the conversation from last night, doesn't it? About giving people the right opportunities for the right type of education that's right for them. Not, the old, the Blair education wasn't that. It was university. Mm-hmm. What you want is for the people who want practical jobs to get practical training, and the right thing that suits them, not the right thing that suits some academic trying to think about things in Westminster.
And this is from Fergus MacDonald, and he said blue collar conservatives must stand up for the freedom to think, to speak, to be different, to challenge, get away from this political correctness, what you can and can't say, what you're allowed to do. Do you think you're standing up for that, Dehenna?
I think so. I think it's about just being a bit no nonsense and talking common sense. And so one of the things I did during my election campaign was rather than doing town halls inviting people to come to real stuffy meetings, I ran a series of kind of pub conversations inspired by the blue collar pub conversations, where I'd go sit in a pub, advertise it on Facebook and say to people, I'm going to be here for 2 hours, 3 hours, I'll be having a pint, come and sit with me, have a chat, and let's talk about what matters to you. Because I think as politicians we spend too long talking about what we think are the buzzwords, what we think are the issues of the day, and not always enough time listening. So that was really invaluable for me. And the fact it was in such a relaxed setting meant that we were able to talk in a really no-nonsense way about things, and people appreciate that. They don't want a snazzy soundbite. They don't want you to sound like a polished politician who's been trained by the Harvard Academy or something. What they want is someone who's real and someone who they know is going to stand up for them and their values.
And I think when we talk about are you willing to pay more to buy British, and on this poll we've had 96% of people say they would. What do you think that's going to the core of, the nub of there? I mean, that's a heck of a lot of people saying we'd be prepared to pay more so long as it was British. What do you think that's getting to the heart of?
Supporting each other. I think it's about, the fact that if, you go back to eBay, eBay make washing machines and as long as humidifiers and all that sort of stuff. But, if you're going to buy a washing machine and your mate has got a job at eBay, you're helping him keep his job. And I think if that just is used as a metaphor for British industry per se, then whether you're buying whatever it is, if you're doing that in the UK, you're keeping somebody else in a job. You're helping the local economy. You're helping to get that position through. And I don't think we've got that message through often enough in the past. And we've been too much about trying to, go into the throwaway culture. Oh, it's cheap and cheap, or we'll have something from China or wherever it's come from. Maybe we should be looking at things that are more sustainable.
Yeah, but if you're trying to purchase things on a tight budget, there will be a time where you think, well, I can't pay some more. So I'm just, so I think we have to be mindful of what people can afford as well. So what can we, how do we divide this up? What should we get elsewhere? How do we save our pennies? What do we do? I'm just thinking that it's interesting that 96% said they prepared to that. So I guess you've got to say, well, what would I do without? What can't I have if I'm paying more?
I think as well, though, it depends on degree, doesn't it? It's like I said earlier in the conversation, that if you're asked to pay twice as much for your washing machine, then I'm sorry, eBay, you're not going to make a turn. You've got to be competitive. But as long as your prices are competitive, people will, take cognizance of the fact that it's a British brand. If you are out of the park, then business doesn't work that way. People don't work that way. They've got. There's only so many pennies in the pocket at the start of the week.
And that's what I was getting back to when you talked about the sort of pragmatism of the sort of people you represent. When you talk about the common sense of the people you represent, that has to be taken into account too. So we have got to be competitive, globally competitive. We do need to be selling away. But I think that's really wonderful that the British public want to support one another.
I completely agree, and I think what it shows is this incredible sense of kind of patriotism that we see right across our communities, but it's something that for some reason in the Westminster bubble people seem a little bit ashamed of and a little bit frightened to talk about, particularly at the moment amongst the Labour Party. I mean, the way that they voted on the Armed Forces Bill was absolute madness. I couldn't actually believe it, and it did not resonate with people in my constituency who are patriotic. They're right behind our veterans. They want to see the UK succeed and are very proud to fly that Union Jack.
Why do you think we stop being proud?
There's so much not wanting to support the armed forces in that thing, and yet the people that actually voted against it then sacked them. So where's this? It's just about standing up for what you believe in, and it's about standing behind the principles as to what you're talking about.
And when people talk about pride, when do you think we started to lose that pride or that confidence in ourselves? When people talk about, look, we want to be proud, we want to talk about sort of our British culture, our heritage. Where do you think we lost that?
I don't think the public and regular people out there did. I think the bubble has, but I don't think people out there ever have. I think they've always been proud. You look at great events like I don't know, the Olympics, the World Cup, whatever it is, those sort of things that bring our nation together. And right across the northeast, right across Sheffield where I grew up, there are people there with their flags, everyone's engaged, everyone wants to see our country do really, really well. It's when it comes to talking about it in these grand terms politically that it seems to have kind of dropped back, I think.
But you can also take it as, maybe it's an inappropriate comment for the whole Brexit thing, EU regulations, about every procurement decision that's taken by local government, by national government, has to give a fair chance to everybody that can possibly buy it or possibly supply right across Europe. And I think you lose your local identity on that because, people are then trying to, in the administrators of these sort of decisions, are trying to do what they've got to do within the rules, but the people outside in the real world are looking at it and saying, That's not fair. It's not reasonable. I don't think any of us believe that the French or the Germans or the Italians follow those rules as robustly as we appear to have done in the past. And I think that that's another reason why the whole Brexit thing has spun that way, because people just want their businesses and their environment to be given at least first amongst equals, and maybe slightly better than that, just to be the first point, as opposed to be, well, no, it's tuppence cheaper out of Italy. Sorry, that doesn't work.
And people, actually, it was from Newcastle, wrote in about that. We do have to think about maybe government contracts being a little bit more, I shan't say weighted towards the British contract winning something like, as you say, the trains from Newcastle, but we have to think of it in the round. What does it mean to a local community? How do we get that money circulating back into a local community? How are we going to get that procurement, which was very big in Sedgefield, how do we get that procurement, government procurement, to work for us here in the UK and locally in Sedgefield?
Oh, and if you talk to the people, like the Furry Hill lot who were about Furry Hill Station and getting that back onto the map and there, they would like nothing better than not just for the Furry Hill Station to be back in place so they can connect to everywhere, but even better if Furry Hill Station was built by local manufacturing companies who build things like that. Fiddly Structures, who you saw build structures, steel structures. There would be that sort of thing. Hitachi in Newton Aycliffe to put the trains on the line. All of those sort of things would just resonate. It would be like the icing on the cake of putting that station there. If they were then seeing things that were built and made in the local area that just enhanced that whole position.
And Bishop Auckland, what do you think people would want?
Oh my gosh, I could give you a very long list of what people would want. But
They want to come and get the train from Furry Hill Station. It's just
I'm
next
sure
to Bishop.
that's it. That's a good pitch.
I think I do think that's the other thing, that central government doesn't get local connections to be able to get from A to B. Now, in London, you can jump on a tube and be anywhere, but I think unless you get out of London, you don't understand how difficult it is to get from each of the cities across the country, or from suburb to city, or from home to work. And that, I think, has to be something we deliver on, this connection locally.
Well, we've both got
completely
very similar
agree.
constituencies in that
Yeah,
sense, very big geographic spreads.
We've both got, as Paul says, those geographic spreads, lots of small communities that are sort of connected by road, which is great. But I know in my patch, to get from one village to another that you could walk in 40 minutes would take you 2.5 hours on buses. It's absolute madness. So we really need to be looking at that as part of our levelling up agenda. And I think we need to be a bit more mindful when we're making those sort of national infrastructure decisions as well, about how it plays out. Saving a few minutes off a journey time to London is great, but a lot of people in my patch don't regularly get a train to London. What they want is a bus to get from Camden to Bishop or whatever it is. We need to give a lot more consideration to that, I think.
Yeah, and particularly with transport, it's about integration. It's about having the whole linkage between buses and trains and
I think
planes,
that's
the whole thing together.
and that's a disconnect, I think, between London and the rest of the country. 100+ billion on high speed 2 for an extra couple of minutes shaved off the speed from London to a couple of cities, when really we need that spent locally on roads, on buses, on our local sort of connection from town to town. I think that is key. And when people equally in London say, oh, people want more money in the north, it's no, we haven't had any money for a long period of time. At the moment, it's only an hour, once an hour train service from places like Knutsford to Manchester. That's unthinkable in London to have, that you couldn't connect between sort of Knutsford to Manchester. Unbelievable. We've got to get this sorted for our regions.
Of course we do. And to get from my constituency to London is quicker than getting from my constituency to you in Liverpool, in Tatton, in Manchester. Getting across the country is just awful in terms of that. And the whole, I get the HS2 in terms of the capacity argument. I don't get the couple of minutes off the Birmingham run, But the whole idea of getting more capacity on the rail, I think, is a good idea. And I like the fact that a lot of my constituents are getting jobs from it.
They keep changing what the argument is. It's gone from speed to capacity, from Manchester Airport to Heathrow to now jobs. To be fair, nobody's on the trains. I mean, that money, absolutely, if you're prioritising spend, and we're a Conservative government who believes in prioritisation and value for money, you'd be spending that money elsewhere now. But for us, locally, across the regions, not just the north, I mean the whole of the country, we need our local connections.
We do, and again it goes back to that point about employment and opportunities, because if you're a young kid who doesn't drive and you want to get a job but you can't get a bus from your village into the nearest town in a timely fashion, there's that job opportunity gone for you. It's about those human stories.
And didn't Joe say that in Sedgefield? He said, my friend wanted to get a job in Newcastle, 3 hours to get there, it should only have been half an hour by train, which meant he didn't get a job. And you're quite right, it's the cost, it's the time, inconvenience.
Yeah, and that's where we go in terms of the HS2 ready argument up there, because we need things like the Lameside line back in, which connects us from, enables the connection between the Tees, the Tyne, the Weir, and all of those pieces in between, extends the metro situation, joins Furryhill, not only to the south, which we can do relatively easily on the current plans, but gets us up to the north. It makes places like that become, commuter places, obviously, but it's almost like Furryhill becomes a park and ride to get to Newcastle, or it gets you into Durham, or gets you to Teesside. Then people will want to live there, and therefore you'll get the whole economic growth that goes with those communities.
So our levelling up, whether it is digital capability, whether it is local transport, this is what we're talking about, levelling up, allowing people to have a fair chance to get a job, to get to school, to get wherever they want to go to. Paul, Dehenna, fantastic. We're still taking emails, we're still taking your opinions. Tomorrow we're going to be in West Yorkshire. We've got Priti Patel, the Home Secretary, speaking to us, and we're going to be talking about kicking out crime. We need to be, the Tory party needs to be the party of law and order. So that's what we'll be discussing tomorrow. So see you then.